Welcome to Decision Point. Is it possible for a former terrorist to become a defender of Christianity and Israel? Walid Shoebat did exactly that and is here to tell us about his journey from hate to love. We just are so glad that you're here today. Welcome.
To be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, is it true that when you were a young man you were actually a PLO terrorist?
Absolutely. Terrorism doesn't start overnight. It evolves. It begins from your time in kindergarten and the anti-Semitic rhetoric that we had, and all the way into middle school, all the way to high school. The education system has always been anti-US, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish presence in the land. And the anti-Semitism also existed in the Christian circles as well. I went to Christian school when I was third and fourth grade.
Oh, really?
Anglican Lutheran school in Beit Sahur, Bethlehem. That's a village adjacent within Bethlehem. Bethlehem was constituted several districts. One of the districts was the Shepherd's Fields, where the angels proclaimed the coming of the Lord. And I went to school, to Christian school. We were taught there basically form of replacement theology, in which that Abraham was basically Palestinian. Jesus was a Palestinian revolutionist. In fact, you could see Hanan Ashrawi, one of Arafat's sidekicks, a woman, and she was Christian, and she says Jesus is a Palestinian from my country. In other words, Jesus is a Palestinian, not. He was born in Bethlehem, Palestine, not Bethlehem, Israel.
So the truth is that he actually was born in Bethlehem, and since Bethlehem is Palestinian at this day and age, it's
right. But there was a conflict because the Bible says Bethlehem Ephrata of Judea, and it talked about his coming in basically in Micah chapter 5. Thou art Bethlehem Ephrata, though you're the least of the clans of Judah. Of what? Judah. Yet out of you comes to be the one to be the deliverer, the Messiah, the governor, basically. And it's Judea.
So you were raised by a Muslim father and mother, or
my mother was an American, Christian Presbyterian American. And she met my father in the U.S. and basically fell in love and got married. And she had my brother and my sister born in the U.S. And then later on, I was born in Bethlehem when she visited the first time in the Holy Land. She wasn't permitted to leave the country. So she was basically, her visit was extended against her will for 35 years.
And that was because she was married to a Muslim man, is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, it becomes an epidemic. Every church I go speak at, I hear stories galore about women with their daughters marrying a Muslim, and the Muslim could hold the daughter that daughter against her will. In fact, we had a rescue mission one time in the country of Saudi Arabia. I hear a lot of stories. And we ended up rescuing that girl from Saudi Arabia, and her husband wouldn't let her go.
And this is something that I think a lot of Americans don't comprehend, that women under the Muslim religion, for the most part, do not have the same rights as men.
Right, but it's politically incorrect subject to discuss on public television or in the media, because there's always a response from the Muslim community that's not true, which it is. I mean, the movie Not Without My Daughter by Sally Fields reminds me of the incident of one story of a woman went to Iran. Her husband was a doctor. So you might think that this is middle-aged thinking, or thinking that is just obsolete. But it's not. Very educated men do the same thing. And they're educated in the United States, and they still uphold the doctrines of Sharia. And in Sharia law, it's very clear men are superior over the woman. And
now, your father was a Muslim, but you came to the United States at a certain point. Is that correct?
That's correct. At 18 years of age, I came to the U.S. I was in California, then I went to Chicago for education. Had family in Chicago, joined, I was active in the PLO, and They later on joined the Muslim Brotherhood in Chicago, and in Chicago I was very active. That's when my activism kicked back into my life, because there in Chicago there was Muslim community, there's Arab Student Association, there's Muslim Student Association. So this is an attraction. What happens a lot to Muslims in the West is that when you have organized form of Islam, that's when the trouble kicks in, and usually that's where the problem begins.
So many people don't realize that what seems to be something like a college student association or cultural club can actually become a recruiting tool
Absolutely.
for radical Islam. Is that what happened to you?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at universities, in 150 universities in the US, there's Muslim student associations.
Right.
If we ask ourselves, how did the Muslim Student Association, how was it born? Where did it start? Where was its inception? And most people don't understand. Sayyid Qutb, the godfather of the Muslim Brotherhood, came to the United States. He was in the colleges and universities of the US. He was in Greeley, Colorado. And the first Muslim student associations were sparked by the Muslim Brotherhood in the 50s, So it was way, way long time ago. And this is why people have this argument with me. They say, when you claimed you were in the Muslim Brotherhood, you were this and that. Even when you were Palestinian, you were involved in Islamism and everything else. So the Muslim Brotherhood's inception in the Palestinian area did not begin in the 70s like you claim, but it did. There's many Muslim Brotherhood activists in the Palestinian areas.
Yeah, I recall that when I was in college, and I was at Cal Berkeley, and
yes,
there were all kinds of associations like that, Muslim and otherwise. So,
that's right.
But at what point did you cross the line from student activist and just being politically active to terrorist? At what point would you say
Well,
that
was in Israel, and what happens is that I was imprisoned. I was imprisoned for simply rioting, and in prison I was recruited. I wanted to do a major activity. I wanted to do a bombing. I wanted to do something that will make a big difference, an impact in the cause. And so I ran into a bomb maker by the name of Mahmoud al-Mughrabi in the Jerusalem Central Prison. In fact, he was so dangerous that he was part of the terrorist group in Tunisia, in which Israelis finally sent up jet fighters to kill 30-some terrorists when they attempted to blow up, to kill Yasser Arafat. It was called Operation Wooden Leg. So I was involved with this person, and after prison we rendezvoused and did some suggested bombing banks in Israel, and I was recruited to bomb one bank in Bethlehem. There was several bombings of Bank Laoumi in Israel as a result of this suggestion. So, and there was also hand-to-hand combats and rioting. I nearly lynched an Israeli soldier. In fact, now I'm having to go back and basically dig out my past, because there's a lot of commotion in the media doubting my past.
Yeah, there has been some controversy about that.
Well,
yeah.
Controversy is always created by denial of something that is factually true, and so that's controversial. In other words, you don't know either or. But it's impossible to find any Israeli official in Israel that would say I wasn't in prison. In fact, CNN, I believe, did a report saying we went to the prison and we found no records. Well, excuse me, if you had any interaction with the prison system, you would show it. There has never been an interaction with any prison official. If there's a prison official that made statements about me not being in prison, they would have disclosed it, because that would have been a great, the ace in the hole, if you will, to say he's not a terrorist. See, this official so-and-so said so-and-so.
Well, that would certainly be a motivation for Muslims to say you were never truly a Muslim, you were never really radicalized, and your conversion to Christianity isn't legitimate, or you were always a Christian.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of reasons why that could be
It's
disputed
interesting
easily.
because when I first became Christian, all of a sudden they claimed that I was a Lebanese phalangist. When that was proven false, then I was never imprisoned. When that was proven false, they never put the bomb. When that was, it just keeps going on and on and on. In other words, it's not the issue of evidence. It's the issue of the message I'm giving.
Right.
You see?
And how did you feel about Christians at the time that you were involved in these activities? Did you see them as the enemy? Or
Well,
how did you view?
I saw America as the enemy, mainly.
So it's America, the country of America.
Absolutely,
more
because
so.
it really, we felt that it gave birth to Israel. It helped give birth to Israel. It supported Israel. In Yom Kippur, or the War of Ramadan, as we called it, it was Nixon that sent weapons to Israel, helped Golda Meir.
Yeah.
So we always have seen that the United States is the mama bear, if you will, that had to basically, in the end, succumb to the will of the Arab masses. And the confidence buildup is growing in the Middle East because they see America finally kowtowing to the Arab Spring, the elimination of Arab nationalism in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya. So the confidence buildup of the Islamist movement is growing leaps and bounds.
So you see that as something that's accelerating right now in a way that it hasn't so much in the past.
Like never before in
Yeah.
history. In fact, this is the time when this is accelerating the most. Because just like the stock market, what creates the stock market, or what makes it, or what destroys it is confidence. And so if you give it confidence, it grows.
Right.
And so we're creating the confidence buildup in Egypt, in all North Africa, in the Middle East, in the Palestinian areas, because even now the U.S. is talking about the Palestinian state. I mean, in the 70s, there was no such discussion in the West as creating a Palestinian state. So
It's a new idea, relatively new idea.
it's fairly
For the
new
West,
idea.
anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's a fairly new idea historically.
Right.
There was never a Palestinian state, in history.
Not in
the
the-
Romans called it Philistia, just to kind of rub it in the noses of the Jewish people, because that was the Philistines, and of course there's no Philistines anymore. Palestinians of today have no relationship with the Philistines of the Bible. They're a mixed multitude, a conglomerate of people that migrated to that land in the 1800s mostly.
When you began, now you actually at a certain point converted to Christianity. How did that transpire?
Well, critical thinking. There's something about the West that it develops what I call critical thinking. In the West, you got Henry and Colmes. In the West, you have, right, left,
Yeah.
Republican, Democrat. In the Middle East, it's usually the party line or the coffin, just as it was in communist Russia.
Right.
So we were not accustomed to this kind of thing. And as soon as my feet stepped into the U.S., everybody was, what are you talking about? Just live and let live. Okay, well, don't talk religion, don't talk politics. Then the Iranian Revolution erupted, and there was Khomeini, and I began to see Islam grow slowly. The Shia won their hegemony in Iran. And so in my mind, as I was in the United States, the Islamic eschatological view that we were taught growing up is being fulfilled. The confidence level began to build up. Because just as Christians have their set of eschatological theology.
Eschatological, you mean end times?
End times,
right.
yeah. In other words, the Muslim world has its own set of end times. This is why Ahmadinejad, when he gets to the podium in the United Nations, he, prays for the usherance of this Imam, 12th Imam, the Mahdi.
Sure.
So, by the way, Mahdism is not simply a Shiite theology; it's also a Sunni theology. All Muslims believe in the coming of this great one, the Mahdi. And so, as we've seen slowly this going on, we began to build more confidence. What happened to me is I made the leap, couple experiences. One of them was in Israel, when I was in Hebron, and I saw a stoning of a Jewish Israeli bus. And I began to ask the question, why did the bus look like a cage? It had bars, wire mesh, bulletproof glass. And why did we stone this bus? I was talking to the taxi cab driver. He says, well, what kind of a question are you asking? It's an obvious answer, they're Jews. But remember, I developed critical thinking. I was infected with Western-style critical thinking. So I said, so what? So what, they're Jews? In America, so what? they're black, so what they're Mexican, so what they're Muslim, so what they're Mormon, Buddhist, whatever. There's no such thinking in the West. The West, live and let live, everyone is equal, And so I began to develop. I said, boy, what happened to me? Why am I asking these questions? I used to do the same things. I was infected with critical thinking. I said, then I guess we're racist. Why can't Jews live amongst Palestinians? There are Arabs, and no one in the world can deny it, who live amongst Jews. In fact, there's Arab communities galore in Israel probably.
Right, yeah.
But there is no Jewish communities live in Palestinian communities unless they have barbed wire fence and protection.
In fact, hasn't the ambassador stated that in the new Palestinian state there will be no Jews?
No settlements, they call
new
them,
settlements, yeah.
They call them settlements here, and the Arab communities are not called settlements, they're called villages. And so these are villages. Qaryat Arba, Qarya means village. And these are ancient villages with people from the ancient times coming back in this great desire to be in their home, in their ancestral homeland. And so we've never respected that idea. So it became a struggle. And then,
so you saw the hypocrisy. You saw that in the United States, it was the Western thinking was live and let live.
Right.
Everybody's equal, but yet you saw amongst your Muslim brothers and sisters a real intolerance for anything except the likeness of Muslims.
Indeed, you're correct. It's hypocrisy. But we can't call it hypocrisy in today's world. We gotta call it we only address the issue of occupation. Every time you say something, why do we blow up buses? Why? The answer is always occupation, occupation, occupation. It's like a flowchart. Everything is the cause of occupation. Remove occupation, and then you will remove the suicide bombing. Well, the more Israelis began to remove occupation, the more suicide bombing began to increase. And now they have to erect a wall between the two communities, which is more disastrous, by the way. And so I began to think that the occupation is not really the issue. It's the occupation of the minds and the hearts of the masses is what destroys people. We were occupied by an ideology that says that we are supreme. And if a land was
that you are supreme.
Absolutely. And all the isms of the world has a superiority complex. Nazism had superiority complex. Communism, every ism there is.
Fascism,
we are better than the other guys.
Right.
We are chosen more than the other guys.
So as you began to realize the inconsistency, the incongruency of your thinking, what made you take that step to actually convert to Christianity? What convinced you?
Yeah, actually, what convinced me was my challenge to my wife.
Was she a Christian?
She was Catholic.
Okay.
And I began to ask her questions about her faith. And I said to her, you're better off being Muslim. She said, why should I convert to Islam? I said, well, the Bible has been corrupted. All Muslims believe the Bible has been changed. God doesn't have a son, neither was Jesus crucified. And in fact, there is no Muslim in the world that believes that God had a son or that believes in the Trinity or that Jesus was crucified. And so she began to ask me, you say the Bible has been corrupted, perhaps you can point out these corruptions to me and I'll be glad to become Muslim. So in my thinking, I said, praise Allah, it's time for me to work really hard and diligent to convert my wife. And so I purchased a Bible for $10 and I began to look for the problems. Putting it side by side with the Quran and comparing the two together, that's when I began to find the serious research that I was lacking. And that is, God spoke from long time ago, before the Quran, before the Book of Mormon, before any book. And right in Genesis, he said that there'll always be enmity between evil and women. The devil always hates the woman. I will put enmity between you and the woman. And so I saw in every ism, in fact, the hatred of women. If people don't know about the hatred of women in Nazism, they better start thinking twice. Nazism used women as simply a production factory for Nazi children, Aryan race. Even in the Mormon religion, in the inception of the Mormon religion, there was concubines and everything else. Islam, of course, Muhammad can marry any woman. In fact, women can give themselves to him from his even cousins.
And can you tell us what is the difference between Muhammad and Jesus?
Oh, tremendous.
And in a brief synopsis, I know you could go on forever
Well,
about that. Yeah,
well,
definitely.
Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, made claims that only belongs to Jesus. You know, he called himself the glorious one. He called himself first, last. He called himself أول خلق الله, which means the first of all creation. He gave himself titles that only belongs to Jesus. In other words, you know, it's an antichrist spirit. The difference is that he denied the Son. Well, Jesus never denied he was the Son of God. So in other words, it's an antichrist spirit, because in 1 John 2:22 it says, who is the liar? It is but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ. He is the antichrist that denies the Father and the Son.
So did Muhammad claim that he was the Son of God?
No, he denied the sonship. He denied the Father. He denied the Holy Spirit. At the same place, he is antichrist, but wants to take the position of who Christ is. So he became greater than Christ. So he made claims he was created before Adam even. Well, that's a great claim.
Yeah.
You know, so Muhammad lived, a licentious life. You know, Islam talks about Muhammad's ability to have sex with so many women and so on and so forth. Marriage of so many women, over and beyond what a Muslim can marry. A Muslim can marry 4, he can marry 25. You see, and he.
So he was really kind of a normal man that rose kind of through the political ranks, and then it became politically expedient, wasn't it, for him to basically develop the Muslim religion to be able to perpetuate
he
wars. I mean, it was an evolutionary thing, whereas Christ sort of knew his purpose from the beginning.
He carried on, really.
Right.
If we ask Muhammad historically, he was the mastermind behind carrying the Aryan heresy that died out in Christendom. You had the Arab Peninsula was a hub for the church to throw away all its rejects. Anything that was of heretic origin was eventually extradited to the desert.
Sort of like the Australian penal colony used to be. Huh?
Thank you, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so you had the Ebionites, you know. You had one of his mentors, Sergio, which is, they call him Rahib Buhaira. And he was one of those, Aryan heretics, and he taught him that the Christians were wrong, and God never had a son, and so on and so forth. Denial of the Father and the Son. The Aryan heresy began in the New Testament and continued. So after a while, this Aryan heresy began to grow, began to occupy other countries. After Muhammad died, then we had Abu Bakr and Umar ibn al-Khattab, who even occupied Jerusalem.
So it was really more for political and military purposes, rather than it being a servant, healing, blessing kind of a thing that Christianity really spread for.
It's really the antithesis of Christianity. It's the antithesis of everything Christianity stands for. If Christ, really sent his message throughout history, throughout the whole world, with a wood, with a cross. The Islam and the Quran came with a sword, with a metal.
Right. Now, I know we're running out of time, and I wanted to ask you a question. Having been there, what does radical Islam want Americans to believe about Islam?
Well, number one, they want to basically make America Sharia compliant. That's the main theme. In fact, I didn't coin the term Sharia compliant. Sharia compliant is a term that was coined by the Imam behind the Ground Zero Mosque from the Cordova Initiative, Faisal Abdul Rauf. He says in the Arabic language, of course, I translated much of his Arabic, he says America must become Sharia compliant.
And why is that? Why is that such an important goal?
Well, it's a very important goal because Islam really is summarized its relationship with the world. It's breaking the whole globe into two entities, the House of Islam or the House of War, basically. The House of Peace, meaning you will enter into the peace of Islam once you become Muslim. The conversion of the whole world. It's never ended. In fact, Muhammad himself said, first Constantinople, then Rome. Americans need to begin accustom themselves with the eschatological teachings of Islam. Constantinople was occupied by Muhammad II. The Muslims conquered the greatest city in Christendom. And Hagia Sophia was converted to a mosque. Then Rome. They haven't forgotten. So Rome, Europe, the West is next. And in the West, here they teach Rome is this evil entity, but yet they're really mixing things up. The Bible doesn't really talk about Rome falling for Islam being a holy thing. So we've forgotten Christendom, and we've forgotten what happened with our war with Islam. Historically, there's been a great war with Islam historically.
Going on way back for many, many centuries, absolutely. What is it that we can do to combat that whole process of becoming Sharia compliant, becoming tolerant of radical Islam here in the United States? I think it's already happened dramatically in Europe.
Yes.
Is that our future?
No, I don't think America will have the same future as Europe. America has mastered the method of melting down anybody. It's a melting pot. And they're much better than what you had in Europe. Europe is a major problem. What happens with Muslim communities is they live in their own ghettos, if you will, and they get into this welfare system, where Muslims in America tend to kind of flourish much better. But that doesn't mean we don't have a problem with Islam in the West, in America, that is. It's not going to become as bad as in Europe. Europe is, if it continues in Europe in the way it is, by 2026, Europe will become Muslim majority. So it's a major
Just by
problem.
virtue of the fact of the birth rate. Of
Yeah,
Muslims,
absolutely.
yeah.
Not only the birth rate, because Europe undermined its Christian heritage. Where America, you still have this heritage. The problem with Europe is that the church became a shell, in which in America you still find many barns with many sheep. So it became a shell, if you will. And if a people begin to denounce their own history, other histories are glad to come and take over this history.
Right.
So the solution for America is really to be proud about the history of America and
To understand it, probably.
understand it
a lot of
100%.
yeah.
Understand why we sing the song From the Halls of Montezuma to the Shores of Tripoli. We had a war with Islam in the West. Benjamin Franklin warred with Islam as well. So we need to understand that going back to be very nationalistic Americans as well.
Okay.
Because nationalism is biblical.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, Mr. Shoebat. It's been very informative. We look forward to talking with you again. And we want to know from you, do you think that radical Islam is a threat to our country and to our faith? Tell us what you think. Visit our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, or our website. Thank you so much for watching.